Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brandner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest today that I follow religiously. I want to read everything that this guy writes. I want to see what he's investigating. He works for probably my very favorite news organization, and that is Breitbart News. But before he got involved in journalism and investigative reporting, of course, he was a police officer. So we're going to talk about that too. Randy Clark, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I got to ask this because I ask everybody, why'd you become a cop?
Well, I grew up in a border town here in Eagle Pass, Texas. I'm still here, almost 60 years later. And I grew up within 100 yards of a border patrol station. And on the border, that's something you see quite a bit of. And so when you see those folks coming in and out and doing their job and seemingly enjoying it, it kind of directed me in that fashion. And I was a security police officer with the Air Force Reserve also at the same time I was trying to join the Border Patrol. So my father was customs and it kind of ran in the family and it was just, something I wanted to do. I wanted to help, wanted to serve.
So you have seen an extraordinary evolution of the Border Patrol. Talk about that for a couple minutes.
Well, it's funny you asked that question because we've seen an evolution of the border itself and of the agency. So when I came in the Border Patrol at the end of the Reagan administration in 1988, the Border Patrol was a very small agency under the Immigration Nationalization Service, and it was only like 2,500 Border Patrol agents to cover the entire northern and southern border. We were very poorly funded. We were overrun at the time because of the recent amnesty law, ARCA 1986. So our agents were vastly outnumbered, and we were catching, over 1 million people coming across the southern border every year. So fast forward through, the post 9/11 days, and we immediately started growing and became, looked at as a national security agency. And now the agency boasts somewhere between 19 and 20,000 Border Patrol agents. So it's grown in size 10 times over from when I came in.
Yeah, when in the 1980s, I remember as a young police officer, you guys were kind of if I may say, the bastard stepchildren of federal law enforcement. And now we look at the United States Border Patrol and the professionalism that the agency has, and the reverence that most Americans have for the Border Patrol. And you literally lived that whole evolution. Now, in retirement, you're with the Breitbart organization. How did that come to be?
Well, so at different points in my career, from about the first, right after the first 10 years, I started working with our sector headquarters in El Centro as a public affairs officer, and that was a collateral function. That wasn't something I did, full time. I would have to read up on the latest happenings that were going on in the border and do news interviews before and after work, during work, and so that kind of prepared me for getting messaging out right on behalf of the Border Patrol. And when I retired and I saw what we were going to be facing, I kind of had this impression that this is not going to be good. And I sorely misunderestimated how bad it would get. But I had worked with Breitbart on some news stories before, and I contacted them and said, "Hey, I'm on the border. If you need a hand, let me know." And it was a match made in heaven, so to speak. I started immediately, and I've enjoyed every day since, and that was 4 years ago.
Nobody covers the border quite like Breitbart does, and that's one of the things that we at the National Police Association appreciate it, because they really get into what's happening, explain to people what's happening, and really from a very pro law enforcement, pro America point of view. What are you now? You're in Eagle Pass, Texas. What are you seeing when it comes to uh, our boots on the ground Border Patrol agents since President Trump has taken office?
Certainly a lot more smiles, a lot more levity. I've seen nothing but unhappiness and kind of pretty much just misery over the last 4 years because, quite frankly, what's happened over the last 4 years doesn't mirror or match anything I saw in the 32 years previous. I often have people, because I travel along the border routinely from San Diego all the way to Brownsville, Texas. Everywhere there is a surge or there's an explosion of illegal entries, I'll go down there and I'll stay for a week or two. I'll report on it there and go to where the next surge is. And I've done that over the last 4 years. And a lot of people ask me, well, you retired from this outfit. You did it for 32 years. What's your advice to these young men and women that are, coping with this? And basically, I tell them, I can't offer anything constructive except keep your head up, because I didn't deal with it. We didn't deal with the level of overcrowding. We didn't deal with the massive humanitarian aid that was required for them to give, and the releases and everything that comes along with that, like health crises, things like that. We saw the Haitian migrant crisis in Del Rio in 2022. We had never seen that before. Nothing like that ever happened. No one ever made landfall to the tune of 30,000 people in a small Texas city and camped out under the bridge, basically serving as their own prison guards and their own, economy that unfolded with traveling back and forth to Mexico to bring food and sell it. And there was just all kinds of madness going on at that time.
And for example, the Del Rio situation, the National Police Association, we got involved in that when we saw our mounted Border Patrol agents get accused of, whipping the migrants, all of those ridiculous things. I was actually in the green room of a national television show, the electronic green room, when Joe Biden came out and said people are going to be punished, heads are going to roll, all of that. And these agents were wrongly accused of doing things at a time where, and this is something I'm sure you've seen throughout your career, Border Patrol agents do far more saving of lives than they do taking people into custody, don't they?
Well, they absolutely do. And really what the travesty of this particular instance is, with law enforcement, you're going to get a complaint. If you're out there doing your job, somebody's going to be unhappy with it. And it's usually going to be the criminal. And so that comes with the territory. You've got to be tough, and you've just got to take that in a law enforcement environment. It's not always, and it has not always been the past, where everything is gathered on camera and the evidence is immediately available for the public and for investigators to look and see what actually happened. And the sad thing about that, and I know all of these, agents that are working on the horse patrol down there at the time, they're doing their job. Even the cameraman that captured this video and these pictures said they were never whipping anybody. There never was any contact. It looked like they were trying to stop the migrants from going back into the water and coming out of the river with whatever they were carrying, and maybe conduct an enforcement operation or an inspection. But never did they ever see anybody whipping that. And from the president on down to Alejandro Mayorkas, they knew that. They saw those images and they knew. But this was a great opportunity to switch the narrative away from, we have let the border just go to hell in a handbasket, and we've got 30,000 people that we say surprised us. There was no great surprise. I was at that bridge for 3 weeks, and if you go back to Breitbart and you search Haitian migrant crisis, what you're going to find is a series of about 12 to 15 stories that says 500 people are living under a bridge because the Border Patrol's run out of space. And then the next story was 750, and then 1,000, and then 3,000, and then 5,000. And it wasn't until we reported over 15,000 that Mallorca showed up. And really the only other news outlet that ever bothers to come is Fox News. They came as well. And then, of course, the whole fiasco came, where the rest of the world is forced to come in and have a look at what's going on. So this crucifying these agents wrongfully and knowingly was the opportunity the administration was waiting for, to just shift the narrative, and let's talk about strapping migrants and strapping people and holding people accountable. Well, they knew the evidence is out there. Take a look. This wasn't, a verbal complaint with no evidence. It was pretty much clear from the get-go.
You know, these past 4 years, we have seen such a different atmosphere at the border, where people from, what is it, 120 different countries are coming into this country largely unfettered. And I live in the Tucson sector in Arizona, and when I fly out of the Tucson International Airport, I am always in line next to the line where people either have the CBP app or they have a manila envelope, and I have to show my ID and they don't. Now that has since stopped, but talk about what 4 years of that has done to the interior of the United States.
Well, so we know from the unfortunate souls that have perished, it's cost some people their lives. We know the young lady in Houston, 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungari, she was killed at the hands of two Venezuelan illegal aliens. We know there have been others, and that's the immediate. That's what we know has happened. And then you can look at the Tren de Aragua gang that we've seen in Aurora and operating in other places. They're masters at leaving Venezuela and taking carnage with them. They're masters at taking over all devices. They'll go into Chicago and they'll get into drug sales and theft and purse snatchings, and wherever there's money to be made, they'll take over that little racket niche wherever they go. And they're extremely violent. So we know that is happening right now. What we don't know, Betsy, is what's going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years. What's going to happen with those folks that came unvetted from Afghanistan on those planes? There were over 60,000 of those folks that just jumped on planes. And once they were here, I know an interpreter that is an Afghan himself. He's an ally. He said most of those people were not allies. They were not interpreters that had worked. Those were people that had nothing better to do that day except follow the crowd and jump on a plane that was taken off. So we don't know about those folks. We also don't know about those folks that really alarm me the most. And that's what I saw in the Tucson sector was near Ajo. There was just a daily influx of those people you say come from 130 or 140 or 150 countries at a time. And very few were Spanish speakers that I saw. If you go look at the Tucson sector stories that I've done, you'll see that it's everybody from across the globe, nobody from Mexico hardly in that area around Ajo and the Organ Pipe National Monument. It's Mauritania, a place where slavery was still legalized. It was legal in 2007. That's and are they bringing that mentality? We don't know. Are they running from it? It's hard to say because guess what? There's such a language barrier and they are unvetted. We just know they didn't have a criminal record here. We let them go. We don't know where.
And so many of them are illiterate in their own language. So, when they're here and there's this inability to communicate, a lot of them come from socialist countries. So they're expecting to get supported by the government, which they do for quite some time. And it's all very frustrating to those of us in the United States who don't feel that we should have to pay for all of these people to come and live off of our system. But there is still this narrative out there that these are all asylum seekers. You hear that term a lot. We hear that term here in Arizona. These are asylum seekers, and you're kind of screwing with their ability to get away from their terrible life and this and that. How many true asylum seeking people with true asylum claims are have been coming over in the last 4 years, do you think?
So that's what we do know is the vast majority are not asylum seekers. They're running for economic purposes, right? If you listen to the liberal media, they'll tell you it's climate change. Well, the only climate is the climate of Joe Biden that called him to come. We know he did that during the debates, and the climate of President Trump that says you're not going to get refuge here. You're not going to get across the border. If you do, we're going to prosecute. If you get away, we're going to find you. That the difference in those two messages has been night and day. We've seen the lowest numbers in the last month that we have seen in more than a decade. We see migrants. I just did a story yesterday in Panama that are taking boats back to Colombia. They're leaving Mexico and they're heading back before they ever reach the United States. So to accept the narrative that all those millions of people that came in the last, you know, 4 years are asylum seekers, you have to also believe that the United States is the only inhabitable region on the entire planet, right? Because everything is so bad in the rest of the world that everyone has to come live in the United States. Well, we know that is not true, right? People move around all kinds of different countries and they like it there. We know they're fleeing the poverty, and there's a social network here that doesn't exist in almost any other country, especially countries that will take migration in an unfettered amount. So we know that's what people are coming for here, but we're fed a false narrative, and it's pushed, even though the people pushing it understand it not to be true.
You know, we talk a lot about child trafficking, and I have been poo-pooed by liberal reporters on this, that we're exaggerating the situation of the child sex trafficking and the children being passed back and forth multiple times, even being sold by their own parents. Can you talk to the audience about the realities of what it's like and what you have seen over the years, even before the Biden administration, of child sex trafficking and child abuse when it comes to the southern border?
So what we do know is the difference in the numbers, right? And that's when I tell you that, well, I never saw anything like this. In 2020, there were 30,000 unaccompanied alien children that were apprehended southern border wide. That's everywhere for a whole year. When we had any doubts about who those children were, we had time to investigate, time to look and see who relatives and parents were. A lot of times these children were sent in advance because the parents realized they would get sent back home to their home country. They realize that if the child shows up first, we have to find a suitable location that has certified teachers, child psychologists, adequate nutrition, full medical services. And that could be in Pennsylvania, Florida. It could be in your neck of the woods because Tucson has some near, or I'm sorry, Phoenix has some near Florence. So it could be anywhere. When the parents show up in 2 weeks, we got to release those parents so that they can now go be with the child. We don't send the child for removal to the border. In past, we sent the parents to where the child is, and they all get a reprieve, basically. There were 30,000 of those cases in 2020. Since the Biden administration came in, there's been nearly 500,000 of those cases. So in 1 year, the first year was over 120,000 unaccompanied children just sent here by themselves. So the question I would want to ask the former DHS secretary or President Biden or Vice President Harris, who is the borders are, you tell me where these children are. You tell me what happened to them, because I know that we have no federal child protective services. We hired a bunch of contractors to get rid of these children and put them in the hands of somebody as fast as we could, to the tune of $700 per day in detention expenses. And in most of the Biden administration days, there were at least 18,000 in custody for the first 2 years. So do the math. 18,000 times 700. You're not going to do it in your head. It is a ton of money. And we basically shot it down the tubes every single day to just give these children away to the first person that we could get that passed a background check. And by a background check, I mean what you might have done on a traffic stop 30 years ago, where you just call in and any wants or warrants? No, any prior criminal? Okay, give them the child. That's the level of vetting those people go through.
It's just unthinkable that we would treat children from any country in that way. And we still have thousands of children we don't know where they are, right?
Well, and many might not have been children, because we've apprehended people who are 22 that are saying they're 16 and 17. They want to get let loose. They don't want to go into adult detention. Well, when you have 30,000 in a year spread across the entire southwest border, guess what that gives me as a manager? The time to investigate. So we would drive people from Eagle Pass all the way to San Antonio and sit that person in front of a forensic dentist and say, all right, you tell me, under 18 or over 18. And the dentist, they can't tell you, 22 years old in one day, but they can say, that one's definitely between 22 and 30, or 25 and 30. So you get an idea that it's a yes or a no. That wasn't being done under this administration. DNA testing was not being done. We had that capability the last year of the Trump administration and in 2018 to say, hey, this man and this unaccompanied baby just don't look right. There's something off here. We could, in 15 minutes, Homeland Security Investigations, who was on site with the testing equipment, could test and tell you they are both relatives or they are not. And that was a godsend. That went out the window because you just don't have the money or the time to support an operation that looks that closely into 10, 12, up to 14,000 people crossing illegally in one given day.
What do you think the end game was for the Biden administration to just literally throw open our southern borders? What's the end game? What was the end game?
I've heard a lot of people associate this with voting, right? And that would be a long-term solution. And that would mean you need a massive amnesty that legalizes these folks. They got to be in a legal permanent resident status for 5 years. Then they got to want to naturalize before they ever cast a vote. But what people fail to realize is that you vote, you and I vote with our feet, right? And so do these people. You don't need any kind of legitimacy to get counted on a census, right? So where you have places like mostly sanctuary cities, the Los Angeles, the San Franciscos, the New Yorks, you see their tax-paying citizens fleeing those places. And they move to places like Florida and Texas and in between. And well, that means they lose congressional representatives in those states when the population dwindles, unless you import close to 11 or 12 million in the last 4 years that are going to go where? To those sanctuary cities. So I think come the 2030 census, if we don't do something about winning as far as not counting the illegal population, what you're going to find is those places that lost population due to bad policies are now going to get representation and not lose it, instead of losing it to where the citizenry and the taxpayers went.
What do you think declaring some of these Mexican drug cartels, uh, declaring them the transnational criminal organizations, declaring them terrorist organizations, what is that going to do for federal and state and local law enforcement?
So I think that's going to do several things. As far as messaging, messaging is everything, right? When you if you're serious about something, you got to come out and say it, and then you got to follow it up with actions. And so by declaring them a foreign terrorist organization, it tells everybody that's doing business with them, I don't want my money mixed up with theirs. First of all, because I'm going to lose all our money, whether it's government of Mexico officials, we've prosecuted some of their governors. So it gives tools for financial crimes, and it also kind of enhances the level of intelligence we're going to gather over there, right? The extra mile. It gives prosecutors in the United States another tool, because now instead of just possession of narcotics or possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, you're going to be able to tack on the federal charge of supplying material support to a foreign terrorist organization. That carries from 5 to 20 years and more if it involves a death. So I think you're going to see folks that are gun running get charged with that, folks who are peddling fentanyl in Oklahoma, and we can trace that back to a cartel. That gives those federal prosecutors one more charge to stack up and say, okay, you know what, we're serious. We're going to apply this statute. So I think there's a lot there. And we haven't seen obviously the military might, but there was a development today. 29 drug cartel members, leaders, were sent to the United States. They were extradited to go to prison by Mexico, and that included Caro Quintero, who was involved in the Iquique Camarena assassination. It also included some of the high-level SETA members, the Trevino brothers. That sends a message also that, hey, look, you're not going to be able to operate the cartel out of a Mexican jail. You're not going to hope for, some kind of fabulous treatment and maybe the chance to escape later on. You're going to go to a U.S. maximum security prison, and you're going to sit there, and your days are over. And it sends a message to the rest of the cartel that Mexico's not going to stand up for you. And that's just these last couple of months. We haven't seen any strength or power in the last 4 years pressuring Mexico to do a whole lot. We have seen just since January the 20th, Mexico make a turnaround. The language doesn't match. What you hear their president saying doesn't match, but the actions do. She's not stopping those spy planes from flying over. She certainly didn't stop from sending those 29 cartel members to us. So I think she may be, in my estimation, saying the things she's saying to keep from getting assassinated in one of the most murderous countries in the world, and underhandedly saying, okay, you gotta throw me a bone. I'm gonna have to speak this way, but actions are gonna go this way. So I'm a little bit optimistic.
Do you think she's going to help us stop the Chinese from, bringing in the fentanyl components into Mexico and all of that? And do you think we can stop the Chinese from doing that?
I think we can, and I think President Trump is playing that out right now. He just, his latest message on the tariffs is they go forward. No one has done enough. They go forward. On the same day, the 29 cartel members came. I think when the federal government puts its might to it and we want to do it, I think we're going to be able to do it. And really, money is the key. The Chinese understand money. They know this fentanyl is leaving, and they just absolutely don't care, because if this country remains in chaos, that's a benefit for them. We know what they've been doing to us. They have been sending Chinese illegal aliens here for the last 4 years at levels never experienced before. You know, we've been seeing 6, 8, 10,000 each and every month, and their exit controls capabilities are excellent. Nothing moves out of there without the Chinese Communist Party understanding that. So every time this immigration of Chinese nationals came and doubled, there was some incident going on. A Chinese spy balloon was shot down. Now we went from 3,000 Chinese a month to more than 5,000 or 6,000. So there's something behind that. We know police departments in California have encountered the illegal Chinese aliens running around with gift cards, doing those scams where they steal the cards, then they reprogram, put them back on the store shelves. And when you try and charge up the card for $100 at one of the sporting goods stores, it goes right into a Chinese bank account. So we don't know all they're tied up with, but it isn't good in many cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Randy, where can people find you on social media? Where can they read your articles and learn more about what you're doing?
On X, they can find me at Randy Clark BBTX. They can also go to the Breitbart webpage, the main webpage, look under Cartel Chronicles, the world page. They'll find me there, and they can, and on the main page of Breitbart News.
And everybody download the Breitbart app. It's the first news app I open every single morning when I get up. Randy Clark, thank you so much for
Thank you, Betsy.
spending your valuable time with us. We so appreciate it.
Anytime.
And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.